Today we'll talk about the third installment of the Learn to Roar philosophy. We've already talked about relevance. What does it mean to be relevant? We've talked about ownership. Today we'll talk about authority. Authority. I remember right out of the military, coming out as a junior NCO. I'd done almost 5 years. I was big man on campus, so to speak, at 23 years old, and I thought I was all that in a bag of chips or two. And I remember taking a job with a up-and-coming restaurant company as a manager in training. And as I went to this little pizza shop the first day, I spent literally the first 2 or 3 days bussing tables, picking up noodles that had been ground into the carpet, wiping the pizza sauce off the back of the seats where the kids had smeared it across the seat and across the window blinds, cleaning up and cleaning up and cleaning up, and it was gross. Well, the next couple of days I came in and I got to move up from cleaning up the bussing the tables to washing the dishes. Huge promotion. I remember about the middle of week 2 when I asked, will I ever be cutting pizza or working the register? And the store manager's answer was, well, someday. And I thought, I was hired as a manager in training. It says it right on my job application, and on the top of my file it says manager in training. Why am I cleaning up after everybody else? And I had a really hard time with it. And I think I was about 10 days into the job and I just gave up. Now I know I'm the only one who can ever look back on their life and say there was a season when I was a bit immature. There was a season that I didn't know everything I thought I knew. But if you're going to operate as a leader at any level, straight out of high school, leading others, straight out of college, leading others, straight out of a career, moving into a new career, let me insert right here. If you have not yet read The 5 Levels of Leadership by John Maxwell, I'm going to encourage you to do that very soon. The 5 Levels of Leadership by Dr. John Maxwell. It will help you understand what a level 1 leader looks like and how they have influence and how they can take control of an environment. But it'll also demonstrate to you the significant difference between the level 1 leader that everybody obeys, if you will, follows their commands because they have the name tag that says leader, and the level 5 leader that just walks into an environment and already has both the influence and the reputation to begin leading immediately. Those are totally different things. Take some time to read that. The key difference between them is experience. So as we talk about the Learn to Roar philosophy, the pillar number 3 of the Learn to Roar philosophy is authority. And the first element of the Learn to Roar philosophy, pillar of authority, is experience. You've got to have the experience in whatever it is that you're leading in to be an effective leader. I couldn't be a manager of a restaurant that had 10 busboys and 5 or 6 dishwashers and 2 pizza cutters and 4 pizza cooks and 3 cashiers. I couldn't lead that team of 25 plus if I had not done each of their jobs along the way. And at 23 years old, I just wasn't ready for all that. I wasn't mature enough to understand why I needed to do all these, and I quit the job and moved on to something else. Now, the irony was the next job that I took, I was just a server. That was my title, that was my expectation, that's what I felt like I was supposed to do. But I was one of only 2 guys that worked the shifts that I worked. The other one was the manager, but he never came out of the office. But because I always wore a tie and I always had nice slacks on and my shirts were always pressed, when I was serving tables and a server would mess something up, my fellow servers, many of whom trained me, many of whom had more experience than me, because of my presence and demeanor, a lot of people would assume that I was the manager, that I was in charge, that I worked there at the higher level. It wasn't true. And I would always point them to the other manager. But it was ironic that in that place I seemed to have the presence of a manager, and in the other place I had the presence of a busboy. There might have been a little bit of maturity in that 2-week window. No, probably not. It was just misperception. But see, there's a level of experience that says, I've been there, I've done that, I got the t-shirt. I learned my lessons, I've grown up a little bit, I get it now. Maybe that experience comes from some time in the military. Maybe it comes from making some mistakes. Maybe it comes from, I don't know, being on the job a certain period of time, or having a certain level of education before you even start the job. I mean, there are educations that are entry level. In order to become a firefighter, you have to go to the fire academy. But then there's a significant difference between the guy on the back of the truck pulling hose and the station commander. They're completely different. The fire inspector has even more experience and more knowledge. And in every career field, that's the case. Nobody walks in, regardless of their education level, and starts at the top. Everyone has to go through the process. Now, there are also some things that you can learn in a short period of time when process is compressed by intensity. When there's so much to learn in a short period of time, like a tragedy or a crisis, and you learn more about your character than maybe you do about your job. But see, process is generally about character. So when you compress that into a crisis and walk through that crisis, having done it right, that goes a long way toward authority. A friend of mine, and I say friend loosely, I consider him a friend. I don't even know if he remembers my name. His name is Brian Fleming. And Brian is a young man who was serving in Afghanistan, driving along in his Humvee. When a minivan pulled up beside his Humvee, he looked the driver in the eye. And the driver held up a remote, detonated it, and blew himself and his minivan to smithereens, killing half a dozen soldiers, destroying a couple of Humvees. Brian Fleming was burned over a large percentage of his body with pretty significant burns, but he walked away. And see, he has an experience I don't have. He dragged some bodies from that event, doing all he could to save their lives. He risked his own life to get them to further safety. Brian now has gone through reconstructive surgery. He spends a large part of his time, having been about as close to death as one can get and come back. He spends his time talking to wounded warriors all over the world. He flies probably 1 million miles a year. But he is doing the work with the authority of the compressed, intense, momentary experience where you get to see the best and worst of life all at once. Irony, when he came to my studio for an interview, as Brian and I sat down and talked, I walked him out as he was leaving, and I saw his car. And he has a Dodge Challenger, royal purple. And on the back, he has his Purple Heart license plate. And it says, "Nice try. Nice try. They tried to take me out, but they didn't." When you've got that kind of experience, there's a level of authority that comes with it, that compressed process that comes from the crisis. That kind of authority is not for everyone because it takes a lot of character to walk through it. Next, under authority after experience, is empowering. See, it's one thing to gain the authority through the experience, to learn the lessons, to go through the process, to be handed the keys, so to speak. But as John Maxwell says, if you want to grow the level of your authority, give it away. Give it away. You've got to know who it is that you can trust. So we now move from what have you done to who will you train? Will you give away the authority that you have right now? Are you willing to delegate the authority that you hold to hand the keys to your car over to someone else? Can you trust them? Are you willing to empower them? Have you prepared them which is our next level, equipping. So I want to tie those two together. Equipping and empowering are so directly related. They're like strands of a rope. When my oldest son, who's now almost 21, when he was about 17 or 18, he just gotten his license. He stopped by my office one day. I had some clients in, and I was unable to leave to go to lunch with him. But he was out of gas. And so he said, Dad, can I borrow some money to get some gas? And I gave him my credit card, and I pointed to where the nearest gas station was, and I said, you can fill up your tank. So he took my credit card and he left. And by the time he came back, I had finished with my clients and they left. He walked into the office and he said, I am hungry. Do you have any cash? I can go down to the restaurant and get something to eat. And I said, well, you had my credit card. Why didn't you get something to eat while you were at the station? And he gave me the best answer I could possibly have asked for from a teenager. He said, you didn't give me the authority to get food. You gave me the authority to get gas. I want you to think about that for a moment, wherever you are in your leadership. Do you empower those by equipping and training and preparing them in advance? Do you empower them then through delegation to do a certain limit of things? And can you trust that whatever you've empowered them to do, they do with full responsibility, with the diligence and integrity that's necessary, and then they stop? They don't take that authority outside of its limits. They don't try to do more than they've been trained to do. They don't take it on themselves to do what they weren't asked to do. They simply do what they're told to do under your authority. Could you trust them with the keys to your car? See, that's what you do when you pull up at a valet. You hand over the keys to your nice shiny Lexus or Lamborghini or Lotus or whatever it is. When you hand those keys over and they drive off in your car, you've given them the authority to park your car, not to joyride, not to take it to another state, not to pick up their date and go out to dinner, but to park your car. That's why there's a valet key that will only open the driver's door. It won't open the trunk. So if you need to put valuables in the trunk, they can't get to them because the valet key only opens the driver's door and starts the car. Now think about the power of that for a moment when you think about the authority that you hand over. If you are a leader learning to roar in this philosophy, you need to know that you will gain authority both by experience, but you'll also gain further authority by those that you empower. When you delegate authority and they exercise it well, you will see great growth in your authority because others will say, if you trust them and they are trustworthy for me, then obviously you're trustworthy for me as well. That type of relationship building is absolutely essential. And to be good at empowering, you have to not only have experience, you also have to be willing to equip. How will you train them? And who will you train? I do a lot of speaking and I do some coaching. I'm very selective about who I coach with because I feel like the empowerment that I give them to be better communicators and significant influencers is a very powerful and potent weapon. And I take deep responsibility for that. I don't want to empower and position someone who could do damage. I take my role as a leader and an influencer, as a teacher and a trainer very, very seriously. And when you have authority to speak into someone's life, when you have authority to train them, who you train is as important as how you train them. Who you empower is very important as well. You've got to take those things with deep conviction. And before you delegate or hand over, you need to understand the potency of what you're handing over. That's called exercising authority. You've got to be willing to exercise that authority by practicing, gaining new experience, practicing equipping others, practice empowering them through delegation to do those things. And that process is an ongoing process. It never stops. Jack Welch, as the CEO of major corporations around the world, is an advisor to other CEOs. And in a particular interview with John Maxwell, he was asked one time, how often do you leave the second and third level leadership in place when you come in to an organization as its CEO? He said, never. They said, never? There's never a time that there might be a good leader on that second or third level? He said, no, because if there were, I wouldn't be here. If there were any good leaders in the top level, they would have already fixed this problem. But if I'm having to come in, I'm bringing my own team. Why? Because he knows that the exercise of authority from the second and third level, that 360 leader, another great book by Dr. John Maxwell, the ability to lead up, sideways, and down is delegated authority. But it's also the influence that comes from having mastered the experience, the equipping, and the empowering of authority. Exercising that is like exercising anything else. No one goes to the gym on Monday and they're done for the week. No one exercises authority one time and they've got it all mastered. It's a process. You've got to do it repeatedly, and you've got to do it consistently if you want to see results. You've got to do it repeatedly and consistently if you want to see results. If you want your authority to continue to grow, to be the trusted authority in a topic, to be the trusted authority in an industry, to be the trusted authority at a job position, you've got to continue to go through that process. More experience, more empowering, more equipping, more exercising, more experience, more empowering, delegating, more equipping, training, more exercising it. And you've got to continue to go through that process over and over and over. And there will be a point where your authority has reached the level, because of the people that you've influenced, because of the legacy, if you will, for those people that are coming behind you, whose lives you have deeply impacted, where that continued process gives you authority that you can exhibit. Yes, you'll notice all those elements go together. We have, under authority, we have experience, empowering, equipping, exercising, and finally exhibiting. Exhibiting authority is what most people try to do right up front. That's what happens when you get a young manager, a manager in training who has the label. They have it on their name tag, on their file folder, on their job application. I am a manager in training, and you will do what I say because I have my manager in my name tag. But the in training part is a very important part of authority. It's really hard to exhibit authority you have not earned through experience, demonstrated through delegation, and seen that process repeated with success over and over again. To be an authority, you've got to be able to exhibit authority because you've been through the process many, many times. Now, that may come through age and wisdom and being long in your job. Or as Mark Batterson says it, long obedience in the same direction. To be under authority is one of the most challenging things for a person who wants to have authority. That's where experience comes in. It takes time being told what to do, being the one receiving the delegation, to earn the trust to become the authority. But before you can exhibit authority, you've got to go through that process many, many, many times. Now again, your process may be compressed like Brian's was. Compressed into a moment. But I'll tell you something now. At his very young age, still under 40, he's talking to guys 50, 60, 70 years old who've been in combat for many, many, many years, but they've never experienced that near-death experience that he has. Maybe they've lost a limb, or they've lost a buddy, or they've lost an entire squad. But the compressed experience that he has lived through has given him the authority to exhibit way beyond his years. That kind of authority comes from crisis. When you manage a crisis well, when you delegate well in a crisis, when you equip and train and empower others because of the crisis, you can exhibit authority on a shorter timeline. And there are people who have authority in certain areas, people that I defer to quickly. In the years that we've done DJing, there's a process with DMX lighting. It's a specific intelligence code, they call it intelligent lighting, that allows the lights to move around and change colors and all that kind of stuff. There's a young man by the name of Tim Logston, barely 30 years old if he is. I've known him since he was 13 or 14 years old in a youth group. He's now the director of lighting at one of the largest churches in America. less than 15 years. He's half my age. But if I had a problem with DMX lighting, he's the guy I would go to. He knows his stuff. He has diligence and experience on one thing, long obedience in the same direction. That type of committed experience is very valuable. Very valuable. And it's not necessarily age related as much as it is consistency. The ability to sit under authority, the ability to delegate authority, the ability to train others in that same discipline, the ability to empower them to do those things, and the exercise of doing that again and again and again and again gives you authority to exhibit. You know, a false leader or an immature leader, when they want to exhibit authority they haven't earned, experienced, exercised, equipped, or empowered. I hope this lesson has been powerful for you, because it doesn't matter where you are in life, whether you're a government leader, whether you're running your own small business, if you're a parent, or if you're an educator or a student just getting started in life. Don't try to exhibit authority until you've walked through the process of experiencing, empowering, equipping, and exercising. Stick with us. We've got one more lesson in the Learn to Roar philosophy. I believe it's going to be very powerful for you. It is the tool that gives you the crowbar to pass on everything you've learned to the next generation. One last thing I want to say. Authority is the currency of influence. Leadership, according to John Maxwell, is influence. Nothing more and nothing less. Authority is the currency of influence. I'm J Loren Norris, and you've been watching Tell It Like It Is TV. Please hit the share button, the subscribe button, and pass this on to your friends. And if you'd like to get these videos every day straight to your device without having to hunt them down, simply go to iTunes, type in my name, J Loren Norris, find the Leaders Podcast, and download it to your phone or your iPad or your laptop, and it'll come to you every day. You can also subscribe on YouTube and the Tell It Like It Is fan page on Facebook. These videos are there every day. Have a blessed day, and make sure that you learn to roar.